I've been meaning to make this video for a while, and so I'm finally getting around to it. Um, so there's this really cool concept. I've always kind of called it image training because of Dragon Ball, and we'll get to that in a minute. Um, but where I first heard about this in the real world as actually something like scientifically documented and legitimate, not just like mythology, was there was this cool study that showed up. This must have been back when I was in college, 20 years ago at this point. But there was this cool study they did with basketball players where they had a control group, they had a purely physical training group, and they had a mental imagery, and I think they just called it mental imagery group. And it turned out that the mental imagery group did basically just as well as the purely physical practice group as far as improving their free throw skill. Now, before we get rolling on this, I absolutely will be providing a bunch of studies and links and perhaps some further explanation on Substack. So definitely go check that out after this, especially so you can see the sources that I'm pulling from. So the first thing we have to question is, like, what is this, right? So sometimes people will talk about visualization. There's mental imagery, motor imagery, mental rehearsal. These are all kind of synonyms for the same term. And at least one source defines it as cognitive rehearsal of a task in the absence of overt physical movement. And that makes sense, right? You're basically meditating or considering, thinking about, internally studying the subject of some kind of motor skill. I suppose you could do this outside of motor skills, but in our context, we are talking motor skills. And this has been actually really, really well studied, and it's pretty consistent. What we find is that mental imagery groups consistently outperform controls. They do tend to very slightly underperform pure physical practice, but not by much, which is actually the surprising part. The fact that it doesn't vastly underperform versus physical is pretty incredible. Which I wrote down here. It probably should have been one of the first things I wrote down. That's actually pretty incredible. Now, some people have suggested, and I think wisely so, that your best results are to combine physical practice with mental imagery or image training, because obviously you want to actually have the tactile experience in the physical space. There are certain things that are going to come up in the physical space that you can't account for. And as good as your mind is at imagining things, and perhaps imagining things that would never occur in reality, there are going to be things that you can't imagine until you experience them. So it actually makes sense that you still need the physical practice. And I don't think anybody is disputing that. So yeah, we need to bring this into focus a little bit here. Right, so it consistently outperforms control groups. And it's definitely evidence of a mind-muscle connection. They have even shown this on strength training and stuff. People can actually contract and lift more when they focus in and visualize, feeling and seeing the muscle contract. And we hear bodybuilders talk about this all the time. The mind-muscle connection is actually a thing, and it does work. It actually helps. Kind of getting inside of yourself, right? This is internal training, if you want to call it that. Getting inside of yourself and actually feeling and understanding and being able to see and direct, with your mind's eye per se, is really, really powerful. So when we look at this, what we end up having is this really cool justification for things like meditation and like watching tape. Watching tape is actually really important, at least according to some. viewing as an external observer also counts as image training. So like watching tape of fights is actually really important as well, because then you can see some of the things that maybe you yourself can't experience, but you can see them from somebody else. Now, I said I'd come back to the Dragon Ball thing. So the first time I saw this in like pop culture was, of course, in the Namek saga of Dragon Ball Z, when Krillin and Gohan are on the ship with Bulma, and there's no room in there for them to actually fight and train. So they chose to do what they called image training, and they sat down in meditative sitting posture across from each other, and kind of like psychically linked, and proceeded to have basically like psychic battles with each other. Now, it was implied that they were psychically linked, and then that never gets shown again, but whatever. They could even be just doing it independently, and they're just showing kind of the confluence of it. Either way, it was a really cool thing to be like, well, maybe meditation can be useful. Now, we do know, right, they've done all sorts of neuroscience experiments and stuff. Meditation is actually very, very useful. You don't have to be religious or spiritual to get benefits from meditation. So for sure, meditation is very useful. But from a skills, martial arts, combative standpoint, even physical training standpoint, meditation actually has some benefit there too. And then, also, this was, I think, during the Saiyan saga, we see that, Piccolo is, levitating in a seated posture, and, makes a pyramid move. A lot of Piccolo's solo training is mental training. It is psychic training. It is psychological, mental, internal training. And then, in like the combative side of pop culture entertainment, right? In Hajime noipo and in Baki, they make big deals about shadow boxing being like facing a real opponent, and actually, showing through the animation how these guys are actually visualizing their opponent while they're shadow boxing in order to get some effect. And I think that is a fantastic use for it. So then what we're seeing is that it is a really great way to practice your forms, is through the physical practice and with the mental imagery, through the actual shadow boxing, which is, of course, not rehearsed like forms are. And forms are not shadow boxing, and I will say that every time. But actual shadow boxing or shadow wrestling or shadow fighting can be an extremely useful use of your time if you are connecting with the mind while doing it. If it's just movements through the air, it may be okay for technique practice, but for actual like fight practice, the usefulness of visualizing an opponent is actually somewhat evidenced here. And then, of course, right, just for meditation or even third-party watching of other action, other fights, there's a lot of benefit to that. Now, we did say, right, that it is useful to combine it, and then it is a little bit weaker than just physical training. So why would you go about this? Well, one of the good reasons is that you're going to have recovery times. You're going to go on vacation. You may have times where you're between schools or between training partners, and you don't have the ability to train as regularly as you like in a physical space. And it actually turns out that this could be a way to kind of stave off some of the ring rust, stave off some of the stagnation and perhaps atrophy of being away from training too long. Actually spending some time really getting in and vividly imagining opponents and scenarios and moves, and getting in there and getting after it just on the mental side of things is so incredibly powerful. Now, yeah, I still think you're going to want to train your body. You're going to want to keep your physical skills up. You're going to want to keep your agility, your athleticism. You're going to want to stave off a lot of that, best you can with whatever physical practice you can manifest. But, there's going to be times, like I said, perhaps recovery times where you are just beaten into the dirt, or maybe you got sick or whatever. And this is going to be a low fatigue way of you actually continuing training despite being perhaps physically unable to perform or train at a level that you would like. And I think that's a really good thing. So again, this is actually a shorter video than I imagined it might be. But I think it's a really powerful concept and one that people should be making a lot more use of, especially because it has some real solid evidence over a few decades in scientific research, as well as just some tradition and all that. But the fact that we got over 20 years of research on imagery training and mental rehearsal and whatnot being of actual benefit, almost on par with physical practice, that is pretty astounding. And at the worst, it can't hurt. Please check out the Substack for all of the links and whatever perhaps after comments I might have to make in the follow-up article, because I always forget something. And I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Share this with your friends or anybody else who might be interested in this kind of content. If you happen to be in the Metro Phoenix area, come in for a class or just stop in to say hi. We'd love to meet you. Definitely check out our socials and our website that has all of our contact information and all of the other relevant information. And more than anything, check out our Substack. Our Substack will be containing all of the links that we use to cite and reference in our videos, as well as exclusive training content that will be available for premium members. Memberships are cheap, but you can also sign up for free, and we do have articles for free, and we will have more free articles available for you. It is a fantastic platform for what we're doing here, and we hope to see you over there. So I will talk to you guys later, and look out for the next one. Good journey.